You're a little too quiet for me. I'm from Brooklyn. You gotta make some noise.
Brooklyn.
Yeah, Brooklyn.
So I would like to thank you. I would like you to give Diane Durler, I'm never gonna get her last name right. It is. But Diane, my friend, you know, this is her first at bat with a fundraiser for SGP, and we need to give her a round of applause. It's a lot of hard work, and what I think I got, you know, she hasn't killed me yet. I'm very type A about certain things, and so Diane has a lot of patience, and I really have a lot of respect for her because she volunteered to scout the place. She said, you know, my church has built this beautiful addition, and here it is. It's just beautiful, and it's massive. I think 3,000 people fit here. On the other side, if they open this up, it's just massive, and it's beautiful. And we're privileged to be here. SGP is a baby organization. We're babies. I had my first summit last year at the Molly Pitcher Inn, and we are but not even 3 years old, with now 50,000 members. We have active membership on our new media site, and it's really hard sometimes for the state coordinators to compete with other groups and many events. In New Jersey, I have a lot of my friends here from Jersey. You know, there are a lot of groups in New Jersey. It's a small state to navigate, but we manage and we support each other, and we get the job done. We are very strong on Facebook, and we are the #2 hashtag on Twitter. We can out-tweet anyone. SGP really gets that new media. We can blog, we can send it out, and we can make a statement. Last year we took on the EPA, and we were fighting them on their triclosan agent that they had in their soap, and telling us what soap to use, and we told them to stick it. So we are not going to be bullied. We are a group of women who are determined, most of us, to engage in the political process. We are activists, and many of us will run for office sometime soon. So, and tonight I would like to thank Diane for allowing SGP-NJ to combine with her in paying tribute to the 9/11 family members and the heroes and the patriots. You know, we often forget who the heroes are. The heroes are FDNY, EMS, right, NYPD, and the civilians who ran in and out of buildings carrying people. The patriots are people like Pam Geller, who fights on the mosque, Fabricio Benova, who will be here later, and he was a EMS worker, Andy Sullivan from Hard Hat Pledge right there, who's a friend, and said, I am not building this mosque, you can build it over my dead body. Next thing you know, he was in a whirlwind with the news media, and now he's a force to be reckoned with. And most of all, Deborah Burlingame, who's a friend who I admire, and I think is probably the reason that 9/11 has not fallen to the wayside, because of Deborah Burlingame out there. We have to fight the extremists, the liberals, like Mayor Bloomberg, and who told us on 9/11 that we could not have the FDNY present or other people there. So this event, though small in size, is powerful because you are supporting the work of the faces, that tribute that you just saw there. There are a lot of patriots out there who are doing things that were so moved, so touched by what they saw on 9/11 that they will never forget, and they will not allow you to forget. So even though we sold out tickets and people didn't come, the last minute, whatever, we moved it. But you know what? We felt it was important to continue with what we were going to do. And we were not going to be sidestepped, or we were not going to forget what the mission will always be, to educate. It's important to remember. I want you always to remember Because if we forget, the next generation forgets. They're lost. And so it's up to us each and every day to remind the young people, the 5-year-olds, the 6-year-olds, the 7-year-olds, that there are men and women who died in those buildings, who had families, who gave their lives, mommies, daddies, sisters, brothers, never came back. And so every day, I think it's important. I look at Lorraine Stanley, who's sitting over there from Staten Island Tea Party, you know, and she said to me, Rosa, you know, 9/11 is my birthday. Can you imagine? Okay? She's never had a birthday, I think, since 10 years ago. Right? That, what are you to do? But she's a patriot. She's Staten Island Tea Party. She's in their face every day. You should just follow her on Facebook. It's fearless. So I want to thank you for being here, for being a part of this. And don't forget, ever, God bless the USA.
Yes.
I want to introduce a man that I just mentioned. Hard Hat Andy Sullivan is a 9/11 survivor. First responder and spent weeks at the Bucket Brigade as part of the 9/11 cleanup. And everyone that was invited here has some little bit to do with that. In response to the announcement plans at the Ground Zero Victory Mosque, he founded the 9/11 Hard Hat Pledge. The pledge is simply to not work on the New York City Mega Mosque Center. To date, he has gathered over 100,000 signatures. Begin to heat up, Andy has been asked to speak at many candidate and incumbent fundraising events. The only requirement that Andy asks of the candidate is to take the anti-Sharia oath that requires the candidate to fight against any policy or legislation that would invoke any tenet of Sharia law or Islamic principles. It has been determined by the mainstream media that the Ground Zero Mosque and creeping Sharia will be major issues in his historic elections, in this historic election cycle. Andy Sullivan is a lifelong construction worker whose blog, BlueCollarCorner.com, is dedicated to bringing a voice from the middle to readers about political issues at a time when Washington seems so out of touch with America. Ladies and gentlemen, my friend Andy Sullivan.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So great to see so many friendly faces out there. Before I talk about my experience and reflect on 9/11, I would first like to say something about this whole movement that I feel like it's been overlooked and someone should mention it. And this is the rise of conservative women in our society. And people, I don't think, are giving you ladies your due credit. No. Because, that's right, get yourself in it. I mean, I grew up in a household where it was all women. So believe me, if anyone respects your power or your influence, it is me. And like the saying goes, the more I learn about women, the less I know about women. But on a serious note, there's a gentleman I'd like to thank for actually getting me involved in this whole 9/11 movement. And you're going to be surprised when I mention the name, because he's absolutely no one here, I believe, has any kind of credibility for, and I don't either. But because of circumstances, Eric Holder, our Attorney General, and I'm going to tell you why. You know Eric Holder, We Are a Nation of Cowards, Eric Holder? Remember that guy? Okay, he thought it was a great idea to try Khalid Sheikh Mohammed in a civilian court in downtown New York City. And it was that moment that I decided that I was going to awaken from my 9/11, I want to say, slumber. Because for the last 7.5 to 8 years, I tried to forget everything that happened that day. I tried to forget seeing the planes, seeing the carnage, the destruction, being on the bucket brigades, inhaling God knows what, all those weeks working. And after several years of very hurtful, self-destructive behaviors, this man outraged me so much that I just jumped up and I said, enough. Time to straighten my act out. And to get out, you know, my kids, they make fun of me, right? Because I'm yelling at the radio, I'm yelling at the TV, and they're like, Dad, they can't hear you. Yes, they can. No, they can't, Dad. So I said, you know what, you're right. They can't hear me. So I started to do things and go to places and got on the computer and said, you know what, somebody's going to hear me. Because I don't think I'm the only person that feels this way. And that's when I started my blue-collar corner. And eventually, what happened down at the battle with the Ground Zero Mosque, I just started, really began to get engaged. But my story, I wasn't even supposed to be there that morning. As a matter of fact, I was tipped off that the contract I was doing work for was actually going to skip town and not pay any of the subcontractors our money. So I got a tip from a guy who, he happened to be Middle Eastern. I got a tip from a guy who said, you better go down and see Arki because the word is he's leaving town. So if he owes you any money, you better go see him. That is the only reason I was down there that morning. I was actually working in Jersey City, but I snuck over to downtown, and as I was in the building, and I had, you know, several guys working there, I remember being by a window and just, you know, cleaning up, staying busy, just to kill time, and all of a sudden seeing this massive image fly by. Something that made absolutely no sense, I could not process. And a split second later, the impact. Incredible, devastating. At that moment, it was as if we were watching a movie, and this plate of glass was my screen. But then all of a sudden, I had such a clear shot that I could see the people in desperate need of assistance as they were grabbing anything they could get their hands on to wave for help. It was then I realized that no way could this have been an accident. Nobody flies off course into the Trade Center. I know a little bit of something about aviation to know that there are safeguards that prevent this. And I don't know if it was the street Brooklyn kid in me, my radar just went off, and I told all my guys to get up all our gear, lock it up, and we're leaving the building. So, as we began to leave, security tried to stop us. At this point, they were stopping people, and I was across the street. They were stopping people from leaving the building. But of course, they weren't going to stop a bunch of construction workers, not New York City construction workers anyway. So we fought our way past security, and we get down to the ground. And I'm looking up at this horror, and I realize, earlier that morning, we had a little mop-up job to take care of. And we sent a man over there to Tower 1. And I said to myself, oh my God, we have Pablo over there. He's on like the 37th to 38th floor. It was at that moment I decided there was no way I was going with that on my soul. And I turned to my crew and I asked for volunteers to go into that building because he was low enough below the impact point where I don't think he would be hurt. But because I knew the man, and he was a very docile, submissive fella, if somebody told him to stay there with authority, that guy wouldn't move, and he would let the building burn down around him. So I turned to my guys and I said, fellas, listen, we got to get him. I said, I know I can make it up there, but God forbid I get hurt going up. I need somebody to make sure I make it up there to get him, because I know exactly where he's working. And sure enough, my whole crew followed him behind me. You know, they don't talk about the construction workers a lot down there, but there was about 142 construction workers down there. And we did lose quite a few. And a lot of these guys, they were my heroes. And the guys that followed in behind me will always be my heroes. Along with all of the EMS and the firemen and the cops, because as we got Pablo and we're running down those stairs, and it was still fairly empty at that time, the only people I saw coming up were the cops and the firemen and the Port Authority and the EMS people. And I was just in awe that they were running up into that, because I knew things were getting worse. And just by the design of the building, I knew at the very least that the top of that building was coming down, because the Trade Center was designed in such a way that there was no interior supports. The whole support system was based on the perimeter of the building. So when that plane struck, it took a huge bite out of its support system. So I thought it was going to fall like a tree. I never imagined the way it was going to come down. But when we hit the ground, and you wanted to kiss the ground once you got down, I felt like, okay, this isn't that bad. Maybe they can get a helicopter. Maybe we can pull some guys off the higher floors. Maybe if they make it to the roof, we can pull them off the roof. And we could flush a lot of the people out from down below. Because right now, things are still, you know, people are starting to gather together. The cops are developing their muster points. And everyone is starting to go in with some kind of organization. And, you know, I said, okay, there's going to be deaths. And it's going to be bad, but we'll be able to handle it. It was at that moment I heard another noise. And it was up in the sky, and I look, and I see another plane. Now, at first, I think it's a military plane. I said, it's here. You know, to recon the place, you know, secure the area. And that makes me feel a little better. But then I see it behaving in sort of an erratic sort of way. And then it makes this very awkward turn around the tower. And then I see this spectacular fireball come out of Tower 2. At that moment, I thought the whole world was on fire. And I was frozen at that moment. Most of my guys ran away. I just couldn't believe what was happening to my city. I lost somebody in that building. And every day, you know, I think about it. She was very special to me. You know, your first love. You know what that feels like. You know, when your whole world is that person. And I don't know how many people can say that their loved one was stolen by a terrorist attack when the only thing she was doing was going to work. She wasn't a soldier. She wasn't on the police force or the fire department. She didn't take her life at you know, high risk when she went to work. But that day, 3,000 people did. And we must never forget. And then the days after, I heard that they didn't find her remains. So I thought I needed to go down there and work the bucket brigade because I thought I could find them. Well, I worked on that bucket brigade and I met some incredible people from all around the country. And they were amazing. I never in my life felt such a coming together of the nation. And it was that feeling that I would love to get back, especially right now, where there was no conservative, Republican, liberal, Democrat. It was just patriots and Americans, and just proud to be that way. You know, no one was making excuses. No one was saying it was our fault. People there were just to help their fellow Americans. That aftermath was a magic moment in the country's history. And it was a magic moment in my life as well. I remember meeting this older woman, because as you would finish your shift on the bucket brigade, you'd be walking along the West Side Highway. And West Side Highway was barren. You know, they weren't letting any traffic there. So you're walking there, and here there were these throngs of people all lined up with these signs saying, you know, we love you, God bless you. And it was amazing. And people would run out from the crowd, and they would like wipe your forehead because you were covered in God knows what. And they were giving you stuff to drink, stuff to eat. And then this woman approached me. She was an older woman, but she had these beautiful ice blue eyes. And she was wearing a Boston Celtic cap, my favorite basketball team. And she just came up to me and she grabbed me by the hands. And she told me, she said, you're not going to find your healing here. Go do what it is you do. And I felt she pushed something into my hands. And it was like a Ziploc bag. And she just walked away from me. And I look at the Ziploc bag, it was a bunch of Oreo cookies, my favorite cookie in the world. Right? And I went home that night and I got the call. It said, Andy, we need you to run a job downtown. It's time to start rebuilding. And across the street from Ground Zero, we began to rebuild the entire Winter Garden that was completely decimated from the collapse of the towers that day. And within the space of 4 or 5 months, we were working 7 days a week, 12, 14-hour days. I don't know if anybody's been down to the Winter Garden, but it is a majestic sight. And it's still to this day, it's pristine and beautiful. And if you ever get down there, I would suggest you go down and see it. But it was a special time because I remember going down there and it was just for the construction workers, and Pataki and Giuliani and Bloomberg, the traitor, was down there. And it was just amazing. You know, they had this massive jumbotron and they showed the tragedy of that day. And everybody was in an awful, awful, morose sort of mood. But then all of a sudden the lights went on, and all of a sudden you see this guy with a jackhammer. You know, his whole body shaking with the shirtless t-shirt on, and just amazing. The place started to explode. You know, and they were showing us putting up buildings, putting up walls, and it was America rebuilding. And that was a symbolic gesture. And what happened following the next 7 or 8 years was disgraceful. We let that place languish for 7.5 years. And this gets back to the Eric Holder thing. It took Eric Holder to put me in a position where I said, there is no way I'm putting up to that. I'm not going to have Al Jazeera down at Ground Zero with a camera pointing at that crater of death saying, America is beat. And I had to get all the construction heads together and say, guys, is this what you want? Because this is what you're going to get. And this place is going to be turned into an Olympic jihad if we don't get our act together and start rebuilding this place. Because when they bomb something in Israel, there's a crew there the next day rebuilding it. And that's the way we got to be. And I don't care if it's a building, I don't care if it's a community. If something doesn't work and needs to be fixed, we need to rebuild it. Once again, I was terribly honored to be here. There's a couple of people in the crowd I want to say some words about. Deborah Burlingame, Rosa was mentioning her. She has been amazing through this whole 9/11 movement. And I remember being at a protest, and I saw this woman up there. She was fairly attractive. And she sounded like she was from Brooklyn. And man, she was whipping up this crowd into a frenzy. And I said, who is this Brooklyn babe? And she's talking about the Ground Zero Mosque. And she said, we're not going to put up with this, and they're not going to build it here. And I nudged my friend, I said, who's the hottie up there? Who is that? Oh, that's Rosa Leonetti. He says, wow, damn, that girl could really knock it up a few notches. But, and then Deborah, also a very attractive woman. I learned so much from her through this whole experience, because I was shooting guns everywhere, you know, and she would guide and give wisdom when it was needed. And I feel blessed for having people like that put in my path. And I do believe there is a higher power up there who's doing that every day for me, and who's done it. And for that, I am grateful, and I'm grateful to be here. Thank you. God bless you.